Hello and welcome to the day ahead. It is Monday, May the 25th. I'm Andrew Gagan. Well, S&P ASX 200 futures are indicating that the local market will open around 0.7% lower this morning, but that was before President Trump said an agreement with Iran to end the war has been largely negotiated. However, the US president subsequently said he did not want to rush into any deal. On Friday, global equity markets rose and Treasury yields eased as investors anticipated a near-term resolution to the conflict. On Wall Street, the Dow hit a record closing high and the S&P 500 registered an eighth straight week of gains. The Dow has recovered from a 10% correction in March. Since then, tech names Cisco, Amazon and Nvidia have outperformed over the quarter, while the laggards have been led by Chevron, McDonald's and Nike. With the majority of S&P 500 companies having reported results, overall first quarter earnings have jumped 29% from a year earlier, according to LSEG data. Among the companies reporting this week are cloud software provider Salesforce and Dell, which sells servers. And several key retailers report, including Costco, Best Buy and Dollar Tree. As investors look for signs that elevated fuel prices may be eroding consumer spending, Walmart shares slumped last week after it stuck to its conservative annual sales and profit targets. Well, President Trump last night said he's told his representatives not to rush into any deal with Iran. A day earlier, he posted on social media that the US and Iran had largely negotiated a memorandum of understanding on a peace deal that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He subsequently clarified that the US blockade on Iranian ships in the Strait of Hormuz would remain in full force and the effect until an agreement is reached, certified and signed. Both sides, he said, must take their time and get it right. Well, US consumer sentiment fell to a record low in May as surging fuel prices linked to the Iran war magnified affordability concerns, and the University of Michigan surveys of consumers revealed inflation expectations over the next year had risen to 4.8%. And Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller has said the Fed should axe the easing bias from its policy statement and consider a possible rate hike. He said it's just kind of crazy to say you could start talking about rate cuts in the near future. Well, shorter dated US Treasury yields jumped on Friday following the consumer sentiment survey. The US 2-year was at 4.12%, the 10-year at 4.56%. The Australian 3-year government bond yields rose to 4.56%. The 10-year was around 4.96%. The US dollar index was up slightly on Friday. The Aussie currently trading at 71.6 US cents. Oil prices climbed on Friday ahead of President Trump's statements, but for the week, Brent crude fell more than 5%. Brent crude futures closing at $103 a barrel. Gold fell on Friday to register its second straight weekly loss, closing at around $4,510 an ounce. Copper futures rose almost 1.5%. Iron ore was up to $108 a tonne, and Bitcoin currently trading at around close to $77,000. Ahead locally this week, the key data point will be the April CPI release on Wednesday, followed by March quarter private capex on Thursday and private sector credit on Friday. Overseas, there are public holidays on Monday in the US and the UK. Wednesday, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand reveals its interest rate decision. Thursday, April's PCE in the US, as well as first quarter GDP. And on Friday, retail sales and jobs data out of Japan. That is your week ahead. We'll see you again tomorrow.